Hi, Erica McClain here again today. And today we're going to talk about now that you have accepted an offer on your house, what comes next. It's a very exciting time. You're excited. House is sold, but there's still a long process that has to take place. You probably verbally accepted everything, negotiated everything with the price. Now comes time to sign the contract. Years ago, the contract used to be just 4 pages long, and if you needed a rider or anything like that, it was just added to the contract. Several years ago, I don't know if it was a group of real estate attorneys or what, but they decided to put every potential rider out there and condense it into the contract, which is now 13 pages long. What happened to we're supposed to be going green? Why make it 13 pages? So, for the majority of you, there's going to be several pages that don't apply. If you're selling a single family home, there's 1 or 2 pages in here that's all about condo association and homeowner association. There's another 2 pages if your buyer is contingent on selling or closing a property. There's even a rider in there for third party approval. You name it, it's in there. But the most important things on the contract are going to be your selling price, personal property that you've agreed to leave, and the closing date. Now, the closing date is not always set in stone. Ultimately, it is the seller's attorney that schedules the closing. But of course, if the buyer's doing a mortgage, they have to coordinate with the lender. The lender has to be ready with the clear to close. Even though the buyer comes in with a pre approval, they went through automatic underwriting and everything, it's still subject to appraisal and final underwriting. Also, built into the contract is a 5 business day attorney review period. So, both the seller's attorney and buyer's attorney have 5 days to review the contract. They could just say, I disapprove of it and cancel the contract. It doesn't happen very often unless maybe somebody gets cold feet, buyer's remorse, seller's remorse. But that 5 business days can be extended out, and typically it is extended out. Then the buyers have the right to do a professional home inspection at their expense. The contract gives them 5 business days to do that. If they need to ask for an extension on that because the inspector isn't available, they can. Typically, that kind of doesn't happen because the inspectors know about the 5 business days, so they know that they have to get in there and schedule quickly. Then, after the inspection, the attorney review could be extended out. Don't be surprised that there's a mortgage contingency in there unless you have a cash buyer, that the seller's attorney will most likely be getting a letter from the buyer's attorney asking for an extension on the mortgage contingency date. Reason being for that, most likely, is because attorney review got extended out. So the appraisal wasn't ordered. The buyers now have to pay upfront for the appraisal. They're not going to do that until they know attorney review is closed and any home inspection issues have been taken care of. As far as the home inspection part of it, that's a whole nother video. Um, Typically, most buyers usually ask for possession at closing, which means that you have to have everything out and be ready to turn the keys over at closing. The contract calls for it to be broom swept clean, no personal items left behind. In the event that there were some items and the buyer said, "Oh yeah, leave that couch, um, we'll use it in the basement," or something like that, we get it in writing between the attorneys. I've seen at closings years ago that all of a sudden the buyer's making an issue that stuff was left behind. So they want $500 for a dumpster. Not going to let stuff like that happen to my buyers. Um, I like to always ask for a rent back. How a rent back works, even if you're planning on being out the day of closing, you never know what could happen. You hired movers, their truck breaks down, something like that. Um, if we ask for 7 days and we don't use them, we don't pay anything. If we use any of the days, how they determine the rent per day typically is they take the buyer's mortgage payment, they divide it by 30, and that's the amount you would pay per day. If we asked for 7 and we were only there 2, we're only obligated to pay for the 2 days, not the full amount that we asked for. But also, what happens if we don't give possession at closing, the buyer's attorney is going to ask for a possession escrow to be held. It could be held by the title company, the seller's attorney. Basically, it's just that, possession escrow, because you are now a tenant in their property. So they hold back this money to kind of guarantee that you're going to be out. Because if you decide you're going to be a squatter or something and stay in the property, they would have to then give you a 30-day notice to be out. And if you're still not out, then they could file for eviction court. So that's why they hold back the possession escrow. Once you turn the keys over, you get it back. It's usually not an issue. The only time it could be an issue is if you needed those funds for the next property you were purchasing, if you were trying to do like back to back closings. And like they say, nothing is ever a done deal, whether the buyer is doing a mortgage or it's a cash buyer. It's never a done deal until it's closed and funded and the seller has their money. I've seen a few times in the many years I've been in the business. One time, the buyer breached the contract. Now the seller had everything moved out of the house, and we had to put it back on the market because they breached the contract. Another time, we had the day of closing, the lender was re-verifying employment. They came to find out that one of the buyers had just been laid off or let go the previous week and was no longer employed. So they pulled the loan. So sometimes maybe you don't want to have everything moved out. That's why I like to just put that little bit extra time in there, just in case you need it. Um, Typically, the closing date is set by the seller's attorney. I think I told you this already, so I'm probably repeating myself. I do that a lot. Um, the seller does not have to attend the closing. Most sellers nowadays don't. They can meet with their attorney or whatever ahead of time and they pre-sign because it's going to take the seller like 10 minutes to sign paperwork. For the buyers, they can't pre-sign if they're doing a mortgage. They have to be there in person to sign all the loan docs. Depending on the mortgage company, those docs could be 2 inches. And if they're asking their attorney a lot of questions, you as the seller, you're sitting there for hours and hours. Once everything is signed, The closer from the title company has to then send all of those documents back to the bank so that they can check that there was no initials missing anywhere, and then they will fund the loan. So for the buyers, it's several hours. Most sellers, let's face it, you could probably find better things to do with your time than sit around while buyers are signing loan docs. Um, Sometimes we have what's called a dry closing, where the buyer has signed everything, everything has been approved, but the money from the bank isn't there. The wire hasn't hit yet. I believe it's only 2 times a day that that money passes through the Federal Reserve. So if they miss the cutoff, that money is not going to show up until the next morning. That's why always usually the first thing we ask is the wire here? First question always I ask to the closer for the title company. That's why I know the attorney I've been working with for 20 years. Um, we always like to schedule closings more in the morning as opposed to later in the afternoon. Because even if you're at a closing, and I've had this happen before, and the bank is on the East Coast and we're Central Time, um, good luck getting a hold of anybody. Do you think that they're staying past their work hours because they know that we've got a closing going on in Illinois? I haven't seen it happen. So that's pretty much kind of everything wrapped up. In the next video, we will talk more about home inspections, get you all completely updated on that. In the meantime, I hope you found this information helpful, useful. Subscribe, hit the like button, leave me a comment if you ever have any questions. I'm always available and happy to answer them. So until the next video, I'll see you later. Bye bye.